The secret powers of the human minds, or the secret powers of the Homo sapien. You can call this video whatever you want, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss with you not theories, but actual events that have taken place during my lifetime that have happened to me. Therefore, this will not be theory other than trying to understand exactly what it is, what happens, sometimes how to recreate it, and so on. I'm going to start in no particular order and disclose to you various different events that took place in my life. I'm going to be very specific as to how I recall the event and not to elaborate at all. I'm going to start with a very recent event. I was sitting on the porch of my place where I live, and there was a severe thunderstorm that was going on all around me, and I was actually recording the audio, hoping that I would get a very severe thunderstorm that would be good audio to put on my YouTube channel. I've always been fascinated with weather, and I was sitting there recording, and of course what I'm going to tell you, you would sum it up to coincidence. I do not. As I was sitting there with the tape recorder running, and lightning was striking generally all around me within 1 mile radius. It was a very severe storm. The other people in the household were afraid and ran inside and would not come out on the porch, and said that I was crazy for staying outside. My logical deduction was, as I'm as safe here as I am inside. To get struck by lightning would be a odds of a lottery type event. So as I sat there and the lightning was more intense, more intense, more intense, I then heard a bit of a lull, maybe a minute. But for some reason I expected to get a lightning strike very close to me. And as I sat there, I started to speak that you may think that most of the lightning is over. And I said, but I'm expecting. And at that moment, as I was speaking this, I was also I was leaning down over my desk, over the microphone, and I was speaking those words. I was looking out across my yard at a specific spot on the edge of the brush on the ground. It was, you might say, unintentional, but that's where I was looking, and I was gazing there, not knowing exactly what I was doing. But as I said, I am expecting another, and as soon as I spoke those words, a lightning strike struck that spot that I was looking at. And I say lightning strike struck it. Actually what happened was a ball of fire pulsating, not fire like yellow, white energy come out of the ground, pulsated within a few milliseconds, and within a half a second shot into the sky. All of it to my amazement and excitement, because then I changed my policy of staying on the porch and ran in the house myself, not realizing exactly what had just took place. And that video of that interaction, you might say, is on my channel. You can find it. So what happened there? Coincidence. I've come to understand in my life that there are very, very few coincidences. It would have been a coincidence for the lightning strike to strike at the same time that I spoke the words I'm expecting. But for it to have struck the same time that I am expecting at the exact spot on the ground that I am looking is beyond coincidence. So what does that mean? It means that we have capabilities that we do not understand. I was in a deep, intense thought when this took place. I was highly connected, you might say, to this thunderstorm, and the fact that I was listening to every crackle, every burst. Some of the strikes, I could hear the electricity flying. Sound like electricity. But let's move on to something else. There was a time in my life where I was in a town that I had a warrant out for my arrest because I'm a bad boy. And I was at this restaurant where they were playing music, and I happened to know the people in the band, and I happened to know the owner of the restaurant. I was friends with them, and I was in the restaurant sitting at the bar talking to a few people that were sitting there. And because I've produced at this point probably over 1,000 videos in my YouTube career, if you can call it that, I was identified, you might say, by a lady who was sitting there, who was not a fan of my videos. And she was also the wife of a girl at the time I was living with. She was my roommate. That was her ex-husband's wife that I was living with. Or it was her husband's ex-wife that I was living with. So she took it upon herself to call the cops. Well, I'm 6'2", pushing 300 pounds, and not really a lot of fat. I have a lot of tattoos. I have long hair. My hair is down to my butt almost. So I'm a scary looking dude. So the cops came as I was sitting there, and I was unaware. And during the previous week that I had been sitting there, well, not at that location, but in this general location, previous week, previous months, I had spent a lot of time focusing on the fact that if they were going to try to arrest me, or come to arrest me, or interfere with me in any way, that they would be misdirected, that I had a bubble of protection that existed around me. This was the imagery and thought process that I had at the time. And as I'm sitting there with my back to the door, something, a little birdie in my ear, said, "Get up now, leave," which caused me to look over my right shoulder. And as I looked over my right shoulder, there were 2 police officers coming in the front door. And you know how police officers walk when they are there for business, you know, like they're in charge of everything. including your life. And I looked over my left shoulder towards the back door, and there were two coming in there as well. Later did I find out there was another door further behind me that two were coming in that door as well. And they were coming to get me. I stood up, knowing that I would not be seen and I would be protected. With the woman who turned me in sitting beside me to my right, I looked at her and I said, "I'll catch you later." And I turned and walked. As I was walking, I took a cigarette pack out of my pocket. Yes, I know, they're bad for you. I took a cigarette pack out of my pocket as I'm walking towards the door, towards the police who had just come in. Took a cigarette out, put it in my mouth, did not even look at them, walked right by them, with them there looking for me. Walked out the front door, took a left, went down the front of the building to the end of the building, which was on the corner of a street. Took another left, and there was 4 cop cars sitting there. And I walked past them, and as I was walking past the cars, I started laughing. Laughing because I knew they couldn't see me. And I continued to laugh as I passed into the back part of the building, past the back of the building, and looked to my left, and there were some police officers looking under cars, looking in cars, looking for me. And I'm laughing out loud. And they could not see me. They could not hear me. I just kept on walking. And I walked around the block, went to McDonald's, and had me a high fructose corn syrup sweet tea. And called a friend of mine. Said, "Hey, can you come pick me up, please, or at the other place?" And I called my friend who was running the band at the restaurant and said, "Hey, my laptop bag is there. You know, the laptop I do all these videos on." And I said, "Could you grab that for me, and I'll get it from you later today or tomorrow?" And he said, "How did you do that, man?" He said, "They didn't even see you." I said, "I know, it's awesome, ain't it?" So what happened there? You don't have to understand it exactly to really know what happened there. A hidden power of the human being, or of whichever way you want to look at it, God, or however you want to look at it. It was a powerful event that took place, no way possible for it to happen. A SWAT team entered the building to arrest me and could not see me. At another point in my life, I was in the back seat of an automobile. I was young, I was 17. We were racing. We were doing 140 miles per hour. I remember looking at the speedometer. And I remember telling the driver, "There's a curve coming up ahead." And right after I said that, the curve came up really fast, 140 mile an hour fast. And there was no time to even slow down. And I knew going around this curve at 140 was not a good idea. And I also knew there was a hump in the road, kind of like a small ramp. It's only dangerous if you're doing 140. And we hit that hump in the road. The car left the road the other car that we were racing, we had outran them and just kept going extremely fast and didn't slow down like young teenage idiots. And they seen what happened and described it to us later about the car going off the road, hitting the ditch bank, flipping end over end numerous times, and hitting 3 or 4 pine trees. And there was a fence post, or a post fence, along the edge of this, where it went from road down into the ditch and back into this doctor's yard. And these fence posts were about 6 inches round, meaning in circumference. So they were good size of your leg kind of thing. And one of these fence posts came through the front windshield and went out the back and didn't touch anybody. But when the car came to a stop, I was laying out of the passenger door. It was ajar. There was a pine tree smashed into the car right beside my right shoulder, about an inch away. And the passenger that was in the front seat was in the driver's seat in the floorboard up under the dash. The driver was laying about 20-30 yards backwards in the path of where the car come flipping through. He was laying out on the ground, not moving. I crawled out of the car, and by the way, the car was a car that had been redone, you might say. Well, it had been stripped, but it had not been redone, meaning the interior of the car was missing. There was only seats. There was no headliner. There was no liner in the walls in the back. It was all raw, jagged metal. I got out of the car and started looking for my friends. Started checking myself for injuries. Did not have any apparent injuries that I could tell. The person that was under the steering wheel had a dislocated shoulder and various cuts and bruises, but was okay, generally. I mean, he had to go to hospital, but he was okay. The person laying on the ground, he had gotten the breath knocked out of him. He had general cuts and bruises and such, but was generally okay as well after a trip to the emergency room anyways. But myself, I didn't have a scratch. Not one. Not even a little one. And of course, as a 17-year-old teenager, I didn't think much about this. I just thought it was coincidence. Well, I actually didn't even think about it until some years later when something similar happened again, and I put 2 and 2 together. What happened later, years later, another car situation, was I was driving. I had 3 other people in the car with me, and I was driving, and I was doing about 60 down a back country road highway. And I'm driving along, and we're all talking, and it's nighttime. Couldn't see other than just the road right in front of me. Well, all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I seen that the road went that way, 90-degree right. I had run up a pond doing 60 mile an hour, an exact 90-degree turn, and didn't turn. At that moment of that realization, I blacked out. And when I came to, you might say, I was driving straight on the road again. And as inquiring to the people in the car what happened, their response was, what happened? How did that happen? How did we get around that curve? We turned around and went back. There were not even skid marks. We never even left the road. And none of them had memory of going around the curve. Their memory was blank as mine. So what is that? Is that magic? Is that intervening of another force? Wasn't your time? I find it very interesting because when I tell you these stories, happen exactly the way that I've told you. And in my final time here, I'm going to describe something else that's even more controversial, to make people even more say I'm crazy. Yet I know I'm not. Growing up, I heard the rumor from time to time that my father could talk the fire out of people. And then that's about all I knew for a lot of years. But after some of these events had taken place in my life, I started to realize things ain't exactly how we've been told they are. That there's other things going on here, possibly other powers and capabilities. So there came a time where I inquired to my other family members about this story about my dad talking to fire, and they said yes, that people would call when someone in their family got burned, and Daddy would go and he would put his hands close to the burns and do something. Nothing really, didn't touch them, something else. And that the fire would be removed from their body. It wouldn't be like a instant healing where the blisters disappeared. It would be where the pain went away and the burn healed substantially faster. This intrigued me for many years, until a point come where I was cooking grease on the stove, and I moved the pan and it tipped, and it had quite a bit of grease in the frying pan, and it splashed over the edge of the stove, and it went down and landed on my foot, burning me to the 2nd degree area very badly. Not 3rd degree, but about 2nd degree, major blisters instantly. And I had a blister that was about 2.5 inches tall on top of my foot, a large one, and severe pain. And my daddy came to my mind and what he did. So what I did, not knowing what to do, I just did what came natural. Very similar to what comes natural to you when you have an injury or your child has an injury. If you hit your elbow, you put your hand on it. If your child hits his head, you rub it with your hand. If you fall down and twist your ankle, you grab it and hold it with your hands. Now, I did not grab this blistered foot and hold it with my hands. I put my hands very close to the blister, to the foot. And I closed my eyes and I visualized the heat coming out of my foot. In my mind, visualizing. I visualized it turning white, a white glowing energy, and I instructed it to stop burning and to heal. immediately upon me doing this, the pain left my foot, to my surprise. And so I then had to severely contemplate what had just happened a lot more. It literally was a couple of years of contemplation when I found myself one day with a person, an older female, who told me doctor had told her she had cancer on her face. They had done a biopsy and it was cancer on her face. Like right beside your nostril on the right hand side, just straight out from the nostril. She had melanoma. Excuse me. And I was like, okay. And then she told me she also had a place on the back of her leg in which she showed me was down about 3 to 4 inches above the heel. Directly on the back of her leg there was a sore, and she said it would not heal. And I looked at it and it was basically an oozing open sore. And I thought, well, I've seen many things at this time, at this point in time, and I think that if I have the belief, anything is possible. And I asked her, I said, do you mind if I pray for you? And I said, do you believe that if God wanted to heal you, whatever our Creator is, because understand I'm not a religious person, I'm just not ignorant enough to not know that there is something that we are part of greater than us. And she said, yes, she would love that. She was due to have surgery on her face the next day. They were going to cut this out of her. And I was not arrogant enough to tell her to stop. But yet at the same time, I did and was able to choose to believe that whatever was wrong with her, the cancer and the place on her leg, would heal. I made a choice to believe. So I kneeled in front of her. I placed my hand around the back of her leg without touching her, approximately 1 inch above her skin. I placed my other hand in front of her face. And you notice I say my hands, the same things you use to get rid of pain when you have it. And I closed my eyes and I focused, because I had looked at the spots in question. I had them as an image in my mind, and I focused on those spots being surrounded and engulfed in white energy, kind of like the energy I seen pulsating when the lightning struck the ground. The next day, well, actually it was several days, this lady gets a hold of me and she says, I went to the doctor and the doctor said there was no cancer, and he didn't understand how there could be cancer cells there 1 week and no cancer cells there after the biopsy from what they took out. They looked at it, there was nothing there. She was excited, she was crying, she was wanting to see me and hug me. So I made arrangements, and I went and seen her. And when I got there to see her, which was days later, she said the scab fell off of my leg. It healed really fast. And she was in amazement, and I said, yes, I know. And then I pulled up my britches leg, and I showed her on the back of my britches leg, on the back of my leg, in the exact same spot the sore had come up on my leg. And of course, this concerned me. You know, I might be messing around with something here that I just don't understand. And so now I was thinking, now I've got to get rid of it. You know, I was happy for her, but now I've got this likely cancer on my leg. But a little birdie later on that day or the next day told me, said, I have to be on the dirt. I have to be on the ground when I do these kinds of things, because I have to be connected with the earth. I have to be barefooted. I can have no soles on my feet. You know, shoes with the soles. There's a reason why it's called the sole of your foot. Okay? So you have to be barefooted. I said, okay. So then I did a, lack of a better words, a prayer for my own self to get rid of the sore that was now on the back of my leg in the exact same spot. And it healed, and it fell off, and I have a little teeny scar still that I'm looking at right now on the back of my leg. But it's perfectly healed. So, what is that? I can hear a few of you jumping up and down, you know, saying, fraud! Liar! I hear a few of you saying, faith healer. I hear a few of you saying, unsubscribe. But what is that? You know, the purpose of this video was to help you understand that based on my life experiences, and there are others, but we're in excess of 30 minutes in here. Help you understand that there's more to you than you've been told. You have power in your mind. You have power of healing in your hands. To maybe help you widen your thinking just a little bit.